Hello friends, welcome to the channel IT Simplified. Before I start, I'd like to wish everybody a very happy new year and hopefully you're having good time with your family and friends and this year brings and fulfill all the wishes that you have and my expectation is that there is more love, more peace around the world. So on this first day of the new year, I was thinking of making a video and I was not able to come to any specific topic. So I thought that, why not make a video which comprises of different technologies, different uh, services which are there within Azure. And that's why I have named, as you can see, the topic for this video, I've given it Azure Marathon video. There is no service called a Marathon in Azure as of right now. Maybe it will come in the future. You never know. But I've named it Marathon Video because this video is going to be long. We will be talking about different technologies in this. We'll talk about Firewall, Bashin. We'll talk about the load balancer, availability set, how to deploy the servers. So a lot of stuff will be there in this video. So if you want to maybe learn about this, how to deploy actually, because we'll be deploying actually hands-on in this session. And if you have time, because as I said that this will be a pretty long video because we'll be covering all these different services. We'll be deploying it. Stick with me for the next whatever time it's going to take. I will try to pause so that you don't have to see some of the deployment which is taking place, just to make sure that the video is not that long. But the idea about this video is to comprise different technology in one video. I have made separate sessions on all these different topics too, but how to connect, how to include in this from the security perspective, maybe how to make it secure. And just heads up that there are different ways you can architect any deployment in Azure. So if you ask me a question, is this the most secure? I'll say maybe not. But again, keeping in mind that we are trying to explore different services, I thought maybe it will be a good idea of including all these different options in this collective in this video. So as you can see on this diagram, I'll be creating a virtual network. It will be, the name of that virtual network will be TDVNet. Everything will be deployed in this. We'll have separate subnets. So we'll have a separate subnet for our servers, for our firewall. As you can see, the name is given Azure Firewall subnet, the server subnet. We'll have Azure Bashin subnet. So all these three specific services will be deployed in three separate subnet, but it will be all within one TDVNet. So the first of all, we'll start from uh, concentrate on the firewall and then on the server subnet, and then after that is deployed, we'll look into the Azure Bastion subnet. So that is what we are trying to achieve today, and hopefully this video will be useful for you. So without wasting any time, let's get into the portal. And as we always do, we'll start with creating a resource group. Our resource group TDRG was created, so that's step one. The next step will be creating a virtual network. So let me go to the VNet. Let's go to add. The whole lab will be deployed in one single resource group, which is TDRG, and we'll be deploying everything in East US. And here we'll create our first subnet, and I'll name it server subnet. Click on create. The virtual network was created successfully, so let's go into this. And if I go under the subnet, I have one server subnet. What we're going to do is we'll create one more. And just be mindful of the naming convention, because some of these services, they want you to have the name exactly. So I will name this Azure Firewall Subnet. I don't need to change anything here. Rest everything remains same. Go and click on OK. And we are adding the subnet for the firewall. So that was also created successfully. And while we are here, why not create the one for the Bashin service too? Okay, we'll name it Azure Bashin Subnet. Go and click on OK. And that is also added successfully. So just going back to my diagram, we have created the virtual network TDVNet. We have created all these 3 subnets. And what we're going to do now, we'll be deploying the services specifically in the subnet. For example, we'll deploy the firewall in the firewall subnet, the Bashin in the Bashin subnet. And as you can see in the server subnet, I'll be deploying a domain controller and an RDS server. And then in the same subnet, we'll be also deploying the availability set in which we'll have 2 machines. They'll be acting as a web server, and will create, and that availability set will be put behind an internal load balancer. So actually it is an internal, let me just, internal load balancer. So that is what we're going to do. So with that, let's go and deploy the firewall. Okay, so let me see if I can find firewall here. Let's go and add. Again, the resource group is TDRG. Everything is going to remain this. You need to name the firewall. Region. Everything will be in East US. Okay, and we already have the virtual network, and the name of the virtual network is TDVNet. For the public IP, yes, we want the public IP of our Azure firewall. Actually, I need to go and add new. Okay, all good. Click on review and create, and click on the create button. Well, Azure Firewall going to take some time. It takes on an average 15 to 25 minutes, depending upon the availability. So what we're going to do is we will utilize that time. And in that time, what we'll do is in our server subnet, we'll deploy a DC and we'll deploy an RDS server. So with that, let's go to the virtual machine. We'll be deploying using the marketplace image 2019 data center. We'll choose DS1 version 2 for the username, provide appropriate. And the important thing is we will not expose our VM to the public IP. So what we want is we'll want that to be routed through the firewall. That is what we are trying to test. So no public inbound port here. And rest everything should be fine. Let me just check one more time. Okay, go to next, which is disk. We'll use a premium SSD. That's okay with us for the networking. For the virtual network, it is TDVNet. Make sure that it is deployed within the server subnet. For the public IP, we don't want any public IP, none. And that's fine. Next, management, no boot diagnostic, review and create. Click on the create button. So while that is getting deployed, let's deploy one more machine, and this will be acting as an RDS server. So let's go, and I've actually opened multiple tabs for my Azure portal so we can work while the other things are getting deployed. So same thing. We're not gonna do anything different in this case. We're just gonna name this RDS server. So I'm just gonna go through this quickly. No availability option. Okay, so I'm back after the pause, and as you can see, both the machines are in running state. So let's do it this way because we will be creating a domain, and there's the Azure Firewall, which is going to come in a moment. So let's do some changes on the networking side. So let me just expand and go to the DC. I'm going to go to the networking, expand the network interface. In IP configuration, we want to make sure that it is in static state. It is right now in dynamic. And make sure that you note down the IP address of this machine because this is going to be our domain controller. So let's go and save the network property. With that being changed, this will be also acting as a DNS server. So I want to make sure that it has the DNS address. So it's its own IP, and let's go and save that too. Okay, with that being done, let's also make some networking changes on the RDS server side. So let me expand that, and we'll also make this as a static IP. We don't want these things to change. Also change the DNS settings. Okay, with the network settings being changed, let's go to our firewall and let's see where is the provisioning state is now. So I'm gonna go and just expand my Azure firewall. So as you can see that the provisioning state is now succeeded. It means it's up and running. We got a private IP of our Azure firewall, and we also have the public IP of our firewall, and we want all these traffic routed through this Azure firewall. So what we want to do is now, in order to make that happen, we need to make certain changes on the rules within Azure. So what we're going to do is, as you can see under settings, let's go to the rules, and under natural collection, let's go add natural collection, and here I can give it a name, because remember, we don't have any public IP of the machines that we have deployed on the server subnets. We want to make sure that we are still able to reach, because we need to do certain configurations. So let's do that. So the protocol we're talking about is TCP in this. The source address, it will be the public IP of our firewall. Just forgot. Let me just go to the resource group. That's the one I want. So the source will be the actually, my bad. It will be under the destination address, not under the source address. Source address I'll put from any. The destination port, you can give any of them you want. right? In this case, I've just put one for the DC, and I need to put the translated address, which will be the private IP of my domain controller, or going to be domain controller, and the translated port will be the RDP port. And I will also include for my going to be my RDS server, same thing. And click on add. So we are updating the firewall rule to make sure that we are RDP into the machine and do whatever we want to do with those servers. So let's wait for that rule to be updated. Okay, so the rules are effective now, and now let's try to test this by going into the RDP session. First of all, try to open that with the going to be a DC so that we can add those rules. Okay, so my private IP, sorry, my public IP of my firewall, and let me just try to connect to it. Provide the credentials. Click on OK, and it's letting me in, so that's perfect. So while that is getting in, let me just try to open with the going to be my RDS server too. Perfect. So as you can see now, all the traffic is routed through the firewall, which is far more secure rather than exposing my virtual machine via the public IP. So while that is getting RDP session is getting initiated, let me just wait for a moment to boot that up. Okay, so both my machines are up and I'm on my first machine DC. So let's make it a domain controller. So let's go and add roles and features. Keep on going. The appropriate roles. And click on the install button. Okay, going back to the server, the role was installed successfully, and now it's time to promote this to a DC. Just the regular settings, nothing unusual. So we'll take most of the settings as default. So the prerequisites were passed successfully. Let's click on the install, and this installation will take some time. So let me just pause the video. Okay, welcome back. So the roles were installed successfully and your machine will restart, which is pretty normal. So what we're going to do is now we'll try to connect to a machine, and now at this time we'll try to use the domain credentials. So let's try to connect. Let me just click on the yes button. So yeah, seems to be working fine. And this might also take a minute or two, depending upon obviously what kind of machine you're using. So let me just again pause the video. I don't want you to see that deployment taking place. Okay, so with our DC in place, let's try to add the RDS server to the domain now. So what we're going to do is we already have initiated the RDS connectivity to our server. So let's go to workgroup, and hopefully it will let me add this machine to my domain, which is ITS or IT simplified. It is asking for the credential. Okay, it says welcome to the domain. So it seems it's working fine. I need to give it a restart for DNS entries to be registered. So yes, I want to restart this machine. So let's wait, and then we'll boot this with the domain credentials. Okay, now let's try to connect to this machine. The going to be our RDS server. And let's try to connect with the domain credentials. Okay, seems to be working fine. So let's wait for this machine to boot up. Okay, so I'm on my going to be my RDS server. So let's go and add those roles here. All the roles will be on this single machine. And wait for this installation to complete. So the RDS roles were deployed successfully, and during the course of time your machine will restart once, which is pretty normal. So let me just close this, and you'll see your remote desktop service is available here now. So let's go to create session collection. You can give it a name. And click on the create button. So basically we are adding the session collection, and in that we'll publish a couple of apps just to test this out. Let's go and click on close, and our ITS apps has appeared, and as you can see there's no app right now. So let's go publish remote app program, and we'll use some of the built-in apps over here. Click on close, and as you can see that our apps have appeared over here. Okay, so with that in place, what we want to do is we want to access this RDS services through our firewall. So what we're going to do is we'll go to a firewall and add a NAT rule collection. It will be over port 443. And click on the add button. So after this rule is updated, we'll try to access our RDS services and see if the apps that we published in our server are available through our session host or not. So the rule was added. So let's now test this. So I'm going to go and try to access my apps. And it should be via my firewall. Okay, go to advanced. Provide the appropriate credentials and let's see. Okay, so here we go. These are the two apps that we had published and we are able to access this. So just going back to our reference diagram. So as you can see so far, what we have done is we have created the firewall. So actually we have created the virtual network. In that we created the subnets. We deployed the firewall. We have created the domain controller, the RDS services. And now as you can see that all the traffic is being routed through our firewall. So that is what we have done so far. So that's complete the first part. Now let's go to the second part in which we'll be deploying the Azure Bashin services as well as our availability set with an internal load balancer. So going back to my portal, actually I can close this. I don't need this. Let's go back to our portal and let's go to all services and try to search for Bashin. Here we go. So we got the Bashin over here and let's go and click on add. Same thing, deploy this in the resource group, the one that we have. Everything is in East US. For the virtual network, it is all in TDVNet, and it makes sure that it is in Azure Bashin subnet. And for the public IP, we'll create a new public IP for this. Let me name this. Review and create. And click on the create button. Now, while that is getting deployed, what we'll be doing is that we'll create an availability set. So let's go and create availability set. And this will be deploying two web servers. Now let's deploy two machines within this availability set. And again, we are not going to open any public IP for this machine too. And the idea is that we want to route this through our Bastion, and I'll explain that in a moment. So let's go and click on all the default, make sure that it is within the server subnet. We don't need any public IP for this machine. We don't need any boot diagnostic for this testing. Review and create. Click on the create button. And while the first machine is getting deployed, we'll deploy one more because this is an availability set. So what I'm going to do is I'll pause this video. And again, as I said in the beginning of the video, this is going to be a web server. So what I'm going to do is I will be deploying the web server roles on these two machines. And I will also deploy a standard basic website or a web page on these two machines. So this part I'm going to skip. I just want to make sure that this video doesn't go over limits. So just want to keep that in mind. So I'm going to deploy the second machine, and on both the machine, I'll deploy the web server role. And then on both these machines, I'll be deploying a basic web page with the name welcome to VM1 and VM2 respectively. So as you can see, both of my virtual machines have appeared on the Azure portal, and so is my Azure Bastion services. So let's go to the Bastion. And Azure Bastion is a platform as a service which allows you to RDP or SSH into your network without opening the RDP or SSH port. So you might be asking a question, right? If I have an Azure firewall, do I need an Azure Bastion? So there is some plus and minus in both of them. So generally what happens is that when you deploy a firewall, right, and you want to allow these machines to be accessed over the internet. Obviously, we didn't configure any public IP for both our DC and our RDS server. We are routing that through the firewall, but it is not that secure as compared to Bastion. Though we have been doing this for a very long time, but it still needs to have your VM exposed through a firewall. Now, that is where Azure Bastion, if you look at from the security perspective, is a little better solution because you don't need to, because it's all being routed over the SSL. So that is what is one major difference. But again, as I said, that once you deploy these resources, your price component also comes into play. Maybe a mix of both of them may be a better solution, or even if you're just using the Azure firewall, it's still better than not utilizing anything, right? So as I said, that again, is it the most secured solution? May or may not be. It depends upon what your organization wants. But I want to show you how you can use this to access your machines. For example, in this case, the VM1 and VM2 by utilizing the Bastion service. So let's go and expand our VM1. And if I go to connect button, you see I have this Bastion option over here. So let's go and click on Bastion and try to provide the credentials. And here you go. I am right into my machine. I don't need to open any port. And this again is a platform as a service. And because it is using scale set in the backend, you don't need to configure, you don't need to manage anything. It automatically provision in case the need arises. So as compared to firewall, if I have to, it's a little bit better in terms of from the security perspective. But again, I have said, it whatever architecture you want to use, it will depend upon what your company requirements are. So this is for the VM1. So what we're going to do is I'm also going to do this for the second machine if it is up. Still say creating. It's been a while. Let me just try to connect to it. And once I'm inside, what I'm going to do is I'll deploy the web server role on both these machines. Okay, so yes, I'm able to connect to it. So that's perfect. And once these are up, my first machine is up. What I'm going to do is I will deploy this web server role. So what I'm going to do is let me just pause the video, and once that is done, I will switch it back. Okay, so with the web roles installed on both the machines, and I've also inserted a basic web page on both those just to segregate and test this out. The next step we want to do is to create an internal load balancer, which will be provisioned in front of these two machines. So let's go to the load balancer. Everything is getting deployed in East US, and the type is internal in this case, and the virtual network is all under the TDVNet and server subnet. That's fine. We want this to be static. And let's give the name, get the IP address of this internal load balancer from the server subnet. So I'll give it with .10, review and create. Click on the create button. Okay. Let's do further configuration of the load balancer. First, what I will do is I will add both the web servers in the backend pool. So let's go and click on add. Just give it a name. And in this case, we are talking about the virtual machine, and let's add them. So we're also creating the health probe. So basically, It will check the health status of that machine in the backend pool, and if there is a failure, it will move the traffic to the other machine. Okay, so all the three settings have been created successfully. So what we want now is we want this traffic to be routed through our firewall. So let me just go to the firewall, go to the rules, and they will add a NAT rule collection. I need the public IP of my firewall. So let me just grab that. And here I'll give the private IP of my load balancer. I think that's what it was. Consolidated port is 80. Click on add. And let me just wait for this firewall rule to be updated. And why this is updating, I just want to point out something over here with respect to using Azure Firewall with Azure Bashin. Because what's happened is that when you're setting up a route table for your firewall, the standard practice is that you attach your UDR to every single subnet where all traffic will pass through your firewall. But if you're using Azure Bastion in conjunction with your firewall, don't associate that subnet into the UDR, because then it will not work. Something to point it over here, right? But as I said initially, right, what mix you want will depend upon a lot of stuff, depend upon what your company wants, how secure they want, and how much they are ready to spend. But something to be kept in mind if you're using that, don't associate the subnet of your Azure version in the UDR when you're configuring the route table for your firewall. Okay, so I'll just wait for this firewall to be updated. And once that is done, we'll just do our testing in which the traffic will be flowing through the firewall, and it will be hitting the internal load balancer. And in the backend, we have two machines. So let's wait for that testing. So the rule was updated. So now let's test this. And we are trying to test our availability set. So let me just give the public IP of my firewall. And as you can see that I'm hitting my machine, which is VM1 in this case, and I'm able to reach. So remember, this is in the availability set, and the way it is configured, if something happens to my machine in the Azure data center, the traffic should be flipped over to the other one, which is there in the availability set. So right now I'm hitting VM1, which is great. But let me do something. Let me just go to the portal and shut this machine off. So there's something happened, there's something update which is happening in Azure data center, or that hypervisor is updated, or the switch which is connected to that machine is blown. And that is where availability set comes into play. I should still be able to reach my machine, and it is all going through the firewall, so it is all secured, but it should flip the traffic to my other web server. So let me just, okay, so I'm getting the error, which is okay, but it should flip me over to the other machine. Here we go. So I'm able to reach my other server. So it's all working fine with me, all good. And the traffic is flowing through the firewall and it's all great. And actually, before I go, something I want to point over here, one more thing. In case you're using your Azure Bastion with Azure Firewall, you don't need to have these RDS roles, which we had configured during the first part of this Azure Marathon video. So you can just delete this and you can still route the traffic through your Bastion, which is actually is more secured way of reaching. So with this, we have completed our video. In this, we have configured the firewall, the Bastion, we deployed the RDS services, the domain controller, we deployed the internal load balancer, the availability set. I have shown you the pros and cons of using Azure Bastion with firewall and what configuration you need to do. But again, in the end of the day, this may or may not be the more secured way of doing this, but this is one way. My idea was that to put everything and compile in one video and showcase how you can achieve this. And I hope you found this video useful. So with this, I will sign off. Thank you. And once again, Happy New Year. All the best. Bye-bye.